The blood-red sun cast a dying light across Cottonwood Creek as Catherine Dawson's wagon wheels snapped like a twig, sending her belongings scattering across the dusty trail. She slammed her palm against the wooden bench, tears threatening to spill from her tired green eyes. This wasn't how her journey west was supposed to begin, alone on an empty trail with night approaching, and not a soul in sight to help a woman whom the entire town of Millfield had deemed unmarriageable. "Confound it all," Catherine muttered, climbing down from the wagon to survey the damage. At 26, she had finally accepted the whispers that had followed her for years. Too outspoken, too educated, too stubborn. The rumors had solidified into prophecy. Catherine Dawson would die alone, they said, a spinster with nothing but her books and her pride for company. She knelt beside the broken wheel, the rough fabric of her plain brown traveling dress gathering dust. Her honey-blonde hair had mostly escaped its practical bun, framing a face that wasn't beautiful in the conventional sense, but striking high cheekbones, determined chin, and those intelligent eyes that had frightened away more than one potential suitor. The sound of approaching hoofbeats made her hand instinctively move to the small pistol, hidden in the folds of her skirt. It was 1876, and the West wasn't kind to women traveling alone, something her father had reminded her countless times before his passing left her with nothing but debts, and a letter from a distant cousin offering teaching work in the Arizona Territory. "Looks like you've got yourself in quite a predicament, madam." The deep voice came from behind her. Catherine whirled around to face a tall figure silhouetted against the setting sun. A man on horseback, his features shadowed by a wide-brimmed hat. "I can manage just fine, sir," she replied automatically, though they both knew it was a lie. The stranger dismounted in one fluid motion, revealing himself to be a man in his early 30s with sun-bronzed skin and eyes the color of a stormy sky. His clothes were trail-worn but clean denim pants, a faded blue shirt, and a leather vest that had seen better days. A gun belt hung at his hip, the weapon looking like a natural extension of the man. "Russell Forrester," he introduced himself, touching the brim of his hat. "And managing just fine might be a stretch, considering night's coming and you're 10 miles from the nearest town with a broken wheel." Catherine straightened her spine. "Catherine Dawson, and I've faced worse challenges, Mr. Forrester." A hint of a smile played at the corner of his mouth, partially hidden beneath a neatly trimmed beard. "I don't doubt that for a minute, Miss Dawson, but there's no shame in accepting help when it's offered. And what would be the price of such assistance?" Catherine asked warily, having learned that men rarely offered help to women without expecting something in return. Russell's expression sobered. "No price, just one traveler helping another." He moved toward the broken wheel, kneeling to examine it. "This won't be a quick fix." "The axle's damaged too." Catherine sighed, removing her bonnet to wipe perspiration from her brow. "Perfect, simply perfect." "My ranch is about 3 miles east of here," Russell said, standing and dusting off his hands. "We can transfer your belongings to my horse, and I'll come back for the wagon tomorrow with proper tools." "Your ranch?" Catherine eyed him suspiciously. For a rancher, he didn't seem to have any cattle with him. "Forrester Creek Ranch. Small operation, but it's mine." There was unmistakable pride in his voice. "I was in town picking up supplies when I saw your dust trail heading this way." Catherine weighed her limited options. Stay with a broken wagon as night fell, or trust this stranger who, despite his rugged appearance, had kind eyes and had made no threatening moves. "Very well, Mr. Forrester. I accept your assistance." She reached for her valise. "But I'll carry my own belongings, thank you." Russell nodded, a flicker of respect crossing his features. "As you wish, Miss Dawson." Though I should warn you my place isn't what you'd call fancy. It's just me and my foreman, old Pete, and a couple of ranch hands. I'm not looking for fancy, Mr. Forrester. Just a roof until my wheel is fixed." As they gathered her essential belongings, Catherine couldn't help but notice how efficiently Russell worked, how he carefully handled her small trunk of books as if he understood their value went beyond the monetary. "You're heading to Juniper Springs?" he asked, securing her belongings to his horse. "Yes, my cousin Martha has arranged a teaching position for me there. That's another 2 days' journey and not the safest trail for a woman alone," Catherine bristled. "As I mentioned, Mr. Forrester, I can manage, I've no doubt," he interrupted gently. "But knowing the land and the troubles that come with it isn't the same as lacking capability. The Hanson gang has been robbing travelers along that stretch. 3 men killed last month." A chill ran down Catherine's spine despite the evening heat. "I see. I'm heading that direction myself in 2 days," Russell said casually, as if offering to escort her was an afterthought rather than a deliberate offer of protection. "Ranch business. You'd be welcome to travel alongside." Catherine studied him as he adjusted the saddle. She'd been warned about charming men with hidden agendas her entire life. Yet something about Russell Forrester's straightforward manner made her inclined to trust him, a dangerous feeling for a woman who'd built her life around self-reliance. "I'll consider it," she finally said, which was more than she'd offered any man in years. As they set off toward his ranch, the last light of day fading from the sky, Catherine found herself stealing glances at her unexpected savior. His profile was strong, his shoulders broad beneath his worn shirt. He handled his horse with the easy confidence of a man who'd spent his life in the saddle. "So, Miss Dawson," he said after they'd walked in silence for some time, "what brings a clearly educated woman to take a teaching position in a rough mining town like Juniper Springs?" Catherine hesitated, unused to sharing her personal circumstances. "Necessity, Mr. Forrester. My father recently passed, leaving more debts than assets. Teaching is one of the few respectable professions available to a woman in my situation." Russell nodded, not offering the usual platitudes about her father's passing. "It's hard country out here, but honest work is respected. The children in Juniper Springs could use someone who values education." "And how would you know what they need?" Catherine asked, curious despite herself. "I deliver cattle there twice a year. It's a town with potential, but like many boom towns, it's growing faster than civilization can keep up." As they crested a small rise, Catherine caught her first glimpse of Forrester Creek Ranch in the distance, a modest but well-maintained main house. A bunkhouse, a barn, and corrals filled with cattle. Smoke rose from the chimney and lantern light glowed from the windows, creating an unexpectedly welcoming sight. "It's not much," Russell said, misjudging her silence for disappointment, "but it's home." Catherine turned to him, surprised by the defensiveness in his tone. "It looks like something you've built with your own hands, Mr. Forrester. There's no finer sight than that." Something shifted in Russell's expression, surprise, followed by a careful reassessment. For the first time, Catherine felt he was truly seeing her, not just a woman in distress. "Call me Russell," he said simply. "We're not much for formalities out here." Catherine nodded, a small smile playing at her lips. "Russell it is, then." As they approached the ranch, neither could have known that this chance meeting on a dusty trail would change the course of both their lives, that the woman everyone said would die alone, and the cowboy who'd carved a solitary existence from the wilderness were about to rewrite their own stories, one sunset at a time. The main house was exactly as Catherine had expected from a bachelor's residence, functional but lacking any feminine touches. Still, it was clean and orderly, with simple furniture, a stone fireplace, and shelves filled with an unexpected number of books. "You can take my room," Russell said, setting down her trunk. "I'll bunk with Pete in the hands' quarters." "I couldn't possibly displace you," Catherine protested. "It's no trouble. I'm often on the trail anyway." He gestured toward a door off the main room. "There's a wash basin in there if you'd like to freshen up. I'll have Hattie bring you some supper." Hattie, Pete's wife. They live in the small cabin behind the bunkhouse. She cooks for the ranch. Russell moved toward the door. "I'll give you some privacy." "Thank you," Catherine said, then added impulsively, "for everything." Russell paused, his hand on the doorframe. "No need for thanks. Out here we all need help sometimes, whether we want to admit it or not." After he left, Catherine explored the modest bedroom. A simple pine bed with a patchwork quilt, a chest of drawers, a small writing desk beneath a window. On the wall hung a daguerreotype of a young couple, the woman pretty in a gentle way, the man bearing a striking resemblance to Russell. She washed the trail dust from her face and hands, then unpinned her hair, letting it fall in waves down her back. Just as she was rebraiding it, a knock came at the door. An elderly woman with kind eyes and silver hair entered carrying a tray. "Evening, miss. I'm Hattie. Brought you some stew and biscuits." "That's very kind, thank you," Catherine said, accepting the tray. The aroma made her stomach growl embarrassingly. Hattie smiled. "Russell said you had quite the mishap with your wagon. Lucky he found you." "Yes, quite fortunate," Catherine agreed, taking a seat at the small desk. "He's a good man, our Russell," Hattie continued, lingering by the door. "Been through more than his share of hardship, but never lost his decency." Catherine sensed the older woman was trying to tell her something. "Oh. Lost his wife and baby boy to fever 5 years back. Came out here from Missouri after that, built this place from nothing but heartache and hard work." The information settled over Catherine like a heavy blanket. The picture on the wall suddenly held new meaning. "I'm sorry to hear that." Hattie nodded. "Just thought you should know, he doesn't talk about it much." She moved toward the door. "Rest well, miss. Morning comes early on a ranch." After Hattie left, Catherine ate the hearty stew while contemplating this new information. It explained the shadow she occasionally glimpsed behind Russell's eyes, a sorrow she recognized, having nursed her own father through his final illness. The next morning, Catherine woke to the sounds of ranch life, cattle lowing, men calling to each other, the rhythmic chopping of wood. She dressed quickly in her spare skirt and blouse, pinned her hair in a simple bun, and ventured outside. The ranch was even more impressive in daylight, not grand like the plantations back east, but a working operation that spoke of careful planning and hard work. Cattle grazed in nearby pastures, a vegetable garden thrived beside the main house, and a clear creek ran along the property's edge. She found Russell by the barn, saddling a horse. He'd already loaded tools onto a small wagon. "Good morning," she called. He turned, a flash of surprise crossing his features before he nodded. "Miss Dawson, sleep well. Better than I expected. And please, if I'm to call you Russell, you must call me Catherine." "Catherine," he repeated, the name sounding different in his deep voice. "I'm heading out to retrieve your wagon. Should have it fixed by sundown. I'd like to come along if you don't mind. I have belongings I couldn't bring yesterday." Russell hesitated, then nodded. "Fair enough. Can you ride? It'll be faster than taking the wagon." "I can," Catherine affirmed, though it had been years since she'd been on horseback. 30 minutes later, they were riding side by side along the trail, the morning sun warming their backs. Catherine had been provided with a gentle mare and was gradually remembering the rhythm of horsemanship. "You ride well," Russell observed after a while. "My father kept horses when I was young," she explained, "before we lost the farm." "What happened?" Catherine rarely spoke of the family's downfall, but something about the open landscape and Russell's straightforward manner made honesty feel natural. The war. We were in Northern Virginia. By the time it ended, we had lost everything: land, horses, my brother Thomas. She swallowed hard. Father never recovered, really. We moved to Pennsylvania, where he found work as a clerk, but his heart wasn't in it. Russell nodded, understanding in his eyes. War has a way of destroying more than just what you can see. They rode in companionable silence until they reached her wagon. As Russell worked on repairing the wheel and axle, Catherine sorted through her belongings, repacking what they could take back on horseback. She caught him glancing at her book collection with interest. "You're welcome to borrow any of them," she offered. "Been a while since I had anything new to read," he admitted. "Winters get long out here. You surprise me, Mr. Forrester, Russell, because I can read." There was no offense in his tone, only mild amusement. "Because you seem to value it. Many men don't." Russell selected a volume of Thoreau, turning it in his calloused hands. "My father was a schoolteacher before he tried his hand at farming. Some habits stick with you." By late afternoon, Russell had repaired the wagon well enough for it to make the journey to Juniper Springs. As they led it back to the ranch, Catherine found herself unexpectedly reluctant to continue her journey the next day. The following morning brought another surprise. As Catherine packed her trunk, preparing to leave, Russell knocked on the bedroom door. "I've been thinking," he said without preamble. "The wagon's fixed, but that wheel won't hold for a long journey. I've got a stronger one in the barn we can swap out." Catherine studied his face, suspecting this was an excuse. "That's very generous." And he continued, "There's a supply wagon heading to Juniper Springs tomorrow with two of my hands. Safer to travel with them." "I see." Catherine folded her hands in her lap. "And I suppose you'll be accompanying this wagon as well." A hint of color touched Russell's tanned cheeks. "I should check on our cattle buyer there anyway." Catherine bit back a smile. "One more day, then." That day stretched into an unexpected interlude, Russell showing her around the ranch, explaining his breeding program for the cattle, introducing her to the small herd of horses he was training. Catherine found herself genuinely interested, asking questions that revealed her quick intelligence. In turn, she shared stories of her teaching experiences at a girls' school in Pennsylvania, her ideas about education, her love of literature. "You've thought a lot about how children learn," Russell remarked as they sat on the porch that evening, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold. "Children deserve more than rote memorization," Catherine said passionately. "They need to understand why things work the way they do, to question and discover." "You'll be good for Juniper Springs," Russell said, his voice warm with admiration. "Though I suspect the town won't quite know what hit it." Catherine laughed, a free sound she hadn't heard from herself in years. "I've been called a force of nature before, though rarely as a compliment." "It was definitely a compliment," Russell said quietly. Their eyes met, and something electric passed between them, a recognition, a possibility neither had expected to find on this frontier. The moment was broken by Pete calling Russell to help with a colicky horse. But that night, as Catherine prepared for bed, she found herself lingering at the window, watching Russell walk from the barn to the bunkhouse, his tall figure silhouetted against the starlit sky. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to wonder what it might be like to belong somewhere to someone again. The journey to Juniper Springs took 2 full days. Catherine rode in the supply wagon with Jacob, one of the ranch hands, while Russell and another hand named Lee rode alongside, keeping watch for trouble. They camped the first night near a small creek, the men giving Catherine as much privacy as possible in the open country. As they sat around the campfire after supper, Jacob, a man in his 40s with a talent for storytelling, entertained them with tales of his adventures in the territory. "And that's when I told that Apache brave, 'Son, if you're looking for trouble, you just found a Texas tornado in britches.'" Jacob slapped his knee, laughing at his own story. "And did he believe your boasting?" Catherine asked, amused. "Didn't have to. Russell here stepped in and spoke to him in his own tongue. Turned out we were on their hunting grounds." Russell apologized proper, offered tobacco as a peace gift, and we were invited to share their camp for the night. Catherine turned to Russell with new interest. "You speak Apache?" Russell shrugged, uncomfortable with the attention. "Enough to get by." When you share land with people, it helps to understand their words. Russell's built better relations with the local tribes than any rancher in the territory, Ellie added. "That's why we haven't had the Indian troubles that plague other ranches." "It's just common sense," Russell said, poking the fire with a stick. "Respect goes both ways." Catherine watched him across the flames, seeing layers to this quiet man that continued to surprise her. A widower who carried his grief without bitterness. A rancher who read philosophy. A frontiersman who sought understanding instead of conflict. The second day brought them into rougher country. Russell rode closer to the wagon, his eyes constantly scanning the horizon, one hand resting casually near his gun. "The Hanson gang?" Catherine asked quietly when he rode alongside. "They've been spotted in these parts," he confirmed, "but they usually avoid well-armed groups." Around midday they stopped to rest the horses. Catherine stretched her legs, walking to a nearby outcropping that offered a view of the valley below. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Russell's voice came from behind her. "Breathtaking," Catherine agreed. "So different from the green hills of Virginia." "Do you miss it?" "The East," Catherine considered the question. "I miss what it was before the war, but that place doesn't exist anymore except in memory." Russell nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Some places live longer in the heart than they do on earth." "Yes, exactly," she glanced at him. "Is that how it is with your Missouri?" A shadow crossed his face. "Some memories are better left buried." "And some need to be honored by remembering," Catherine said gently. "Hattie told me about your wife and son. I'm sorry for your loss." Russell was quiet for so long that Catherine feared she'd overstepped. Finally, he spoke, his voice rough with emotion. "Sarah was 18 when we married. Sweet girl from a neighboring farm. We had simple dreams, a place of our own, children running in the yard." He looked out over the valley. "Thomas was born 2 years later, perfect little boy. He was 3 when the fever took them both within a week of each other." Catherine's heart ached for him. "What were they like, if you don't mind my asking?" Russell seemed surprised by the question. "Sarah loved to sing, couldn't carry a tune to save her life, but she sang anyway, and Thomas. He was fearless, climbed everything he could reach, had his mother's smile." "They sound wonderful," Catherine said softly. "They were." Russell straightened, as if physically shaking off the weight of memory. "We should get moving if we want to reach town before dark." As they walked back to the wagon, Russell's hand briefly touched the small of her back, a simple gesture of guidance that sent unexpected warmth through Catherine's body. They arrived in Juniper Springs just as the sun dipped below the western mountains, casting long shadows down the town's single main street. Despite the growing darkness, Catherine could see that it was a rough settlement, a mix of hastily constructed wooden buildings, canvas-topped structures, and a few more substantial edifices that hinted at the town's ambitions. "Where does your cousin live?" Russell asked as they pulled the wagon to a stop outside the general store. "She's the doctor's wife, Doctor, and Mrs. Harold Phillips," Catherine replied, suddenly nervous about this new chapter in her life. Russell raised an eyebrow. "Doc Phillips is a good man." Patched me up last year after a run-in with a territorial bull. He pointed to a white two-story house at the end of the street. That's their place there. They live above his office. As they approached the house, a plump woman with a friendly face burst through the door. Catherine. Oh my goodness, we were getting worried. She rushed down the steps, enveloping Catherine in a warm embrace. Harold, she's here, she called over her shoulder before turning her attention to Russell. And Mr. Forrester, what a surprise, Mrs. Phillips. Russell nodded politely. We had the good fortune to encounter your cousin when her wagon broke down near my property. Martha Phillips beamed at them both. Well, isn't that providential, Catherine, dear, you must be exhausted. Come inside at once. Mr. Forrester, you and your men will join us for supper, won't you? Before either could respond, Dr. Phillips appeared in the doorway, a tall, distinguished man with silver at his temples. Catherine, welcome to Juniper Springs. And Russell, good to see you without having to stitch you up this time. The Phillips home was a haven of civilization in the rough frontier town, well furnished, with books lining the walls, proper china on the table, and the delicious aroma of roast beef filling the air. Catherine was shown to a comfortable guest room while Russell and his men were invited to wash up before dinner. Throughout the meal, Catherine noticed how easily Russell conversed with the doctor about local matters, revealing a man of intelligence and consideration. Martha clearly adored him, treating him like a favorite nephew and plying him with second helpings. The school board is eager to meet you tomorrow, Catherine, Dr. Phillips said as they enjoyed coffee after dinner. Classes are set to begin in 2 weeks, which should give you time to settle in and prepare. How many students will I have? Catherine asked. About 30, ranging from 6 to 16, Martha replied. It's a mixed group, miners' children, shopkeepers' families, a few ranchers' kids who board in town during the school term. And where will I be living? Catherine had assumed she would stay with her cousins. Martha and Harold exchanged glances. Well, dear, that's been a bit of a challenge. The teachers' quarters above the schoolhouse aren't quite finished. You're welcome to stay with us until they are, of course, but it's rather cramped. She could stay at the ranch, Russell said unexpectedly. All eyes turned to him. He cleared his throat. The journey back and forth would be manageable, and there's plenty of room. Hattie would welcome the female company. A moment of stunned silence followed before Martha recovered. Why, that's a generous offer, Mr. Forrester. What do you think, Catherine? Catherine felt heat rise in her cheeks. Living at Russell's ranch would set tongues wagging, despite the presence of Pete and Hattie as chaperones. It's a kind offer, she began carefully, but I wouldn't want to impose. It's no imposition, Russell interrupted. And it solves a practical problem. The school term is temporary at first anyway, just until winter. By spring, the teachers' quarters should be ready. Dr. Phillips stroked his chin thoughtfully. It's unorthodox, but Russell's place is respectable enough. With the Millers there as chaperones, I don't see why not. Certainly better than the alternatives in town. Alternatives? Catherine asked. The boarding house is full of miners, Martha explained delicately. And the only other option is rooms above the saloon, which is simply out of the question. Catherine looked at Russell, trying to read his intentions. His expression revealed nothing beyond practical concern. I'll consider it, she finally said, but I should see the school first and meet the board before making any decisions. Later that evening, as the men prepared to return to their camp on the edge of town, Russell lingered on the porch while Catherine saw them off. Thank you for escorting me safely, she said, suddenly shy in the lamplight spilling from the house. It was no trouble. Russell twisted his hat in his hands, a surprisingly vulnerable gesture from such a self-possessed man. About my offer, I didn't mean to put you on the spot. It just seemed like a practical solution. It was thoughtful, Catherine assured him, and I am considering it. But you must admit, it would raise eyebrows. A hint of a smile touched his lips. I reckon you're not a woman who's much bothered by raised eyebrows, Catherine Dawson. The way he said her name sent a pleasant shiver through her. Perhaps not, but I do care about my reputation as a teacher. Fair enough. He placed his hat on his head. We'll be in town for 2 more days delivering cattle to the mining company. If you decide my offer makes sense, we ride out at dawn on Thursday. I'll let you know my decision. Catherine extended her hand formally. Good night, Russell. He took her hand, holding it a moment longer than strictly necessary. Good night, Catherine. As she watched him walk away, his tall figure disappearing into the darkness, Catherine knew she was at a crossroads. The sensible choice would be to stay in town, regardless of the accommodation challenges. But for the first time in years, she found herself contemplating a choice that defied convention, not from desperation, but from a quietly growing attraction to a man who saw her strength rather than being threatened by it. The next morning, Martha took Catherine to the schoolhouse, a simple but sturdy building at the edge of town. Inside, the classroom was basic. Wooden desks arranged in rows, a larger desk at the front, a blackboard covering one wall, and empty bookshelves waiting to be filled. It's not much, Martha apologized, but the town contributed what they could. Many of these families value education, even if they haven't had much themselves. Catherine ran her hand along one of the desks, already envisioning the room filled with children. It has potential, she said, meaning it. And the living quarters upstairs. Martha led her up a narrow staircase to a half-finished apartment, one room with a small kitchen area and a separate sleeping space. The walls were up, but the floor was bare and the windows lacked proper coverings. The mining company promised lumber for the floors next month, Martha explained, and glass for the windows, but with winter coming. It won't be ready anytime soon, Catherine finished, understanding the dilemma. Later that day, she met with the school board, a collection of the town's prominent citizens, including the mayor, the minister, and several businessmen. They seemed impressed with her credentials, but clearly had reservations about her independent nature. Miss Dawson, Mayor Wilkins said after they'd discussed the curriculum, we're a growing community with traditional values. Our children need a teacher who exemplifies those values. I assure you, sir, my values include hard work, honesty, and the belief that every child deserves the chance to learn, Catherine replied evenly. Are those not the values you seek to instill? The minister, Reverend Abernathy, leaned forward. We've heard you're considering residing at the Forrester Ranch until the teachers' quarters are completed. Do you think that's appropriate for a young woman in your position? Catherine met his gaze directly. With all due respect, Reverend, I see nothing inappropriate about staying in a household that includes a married couple as chaperones, especially when the alternative is rooms above a saloon. The Millers are respectable folks, the general store owner, Mr. Jenkins, interjected. And Russell Forrester is the most honorable man in the territory. Nevertheless, the mayor continued, appearances matter in a small town, Miss Dawson. Indeed they do, Catherine agreed. And I would hope the appearance of a community that values education enough to provide its teacher with safe, respectable accommodation would matter most of all. A surprised silence fell over the room, broken by a chuckle from Dr. Phillips. Gentlemen, I believe my cousin has made her point. Shall we move on to discussing the school term dates? By the end of the meeting, Catherine had been officially hired as Juniper Springs schoolteacher for a 6-month term. The board's reservations remained, but their need for a qualified teacher outweighed their concerns about propriety. That evening at supper, Catherine announced her decision. If Mr. Forrester's offer still stands, I believe I will accept it at least until the teachers' quarters are habitable." Martha clapped her hands in delight. "Oh, wonderful! I was hoping you would. It's much safer than staying in town, and the ranch is simply lovely." "And Russell," Dr. Phillips asked knowingly, "is the ranch the only draw?" Catherine felt heat rise in her cheeks. "I barely know the man, Harold." "But what you know you like," he observed with a gentle smile. "There's no shame in that, Catherine. Russell Forrester is one of the finest men I've ever met. He's carried his grief with dignity and built something to be proud of." "I'm not looking for a husband," Catherine said firmly. "I came west to teach and to build a life of my own." "The two aren't mutually exclusive," Martha pointed out. "And Russell isn't the type of man who would expect you to abandon your calling." Catherine changed the subject, uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. But that night, as she prepared for bed, she found herself thinking about Russell's quiet strength, his unexpected depth, and the way his eyes seemed to truly see her. For a woman who had resigned herself to spinsterhood, these thoughts were as frightening as they were exhilarating. The next morning, Catherine sought out Russell at the cattle pens on the edge of town. He was working alongside his men, his shirt sleeves rolled up, revealing muscular forearms as he handled the livestock with calm efficiency. He noticed her approach and stepped away from the pen, wiping his brow with a bandana. "Morning, Catherine." "Good morning. I hope I'm not interrupting." "Not at all." He gestured toward a shady spot away from the dust and noise. "Something on your mind?" "I've decided to accept your offer," Catherine said directly, "if it still stands. The board approved my appointment yesterday, but the living quarters won't be ready for some time." A smile spread across Russell's face, transforming his serious features. "The offer stands. We'll head out at first light tomorrow if that suits you." "It does, thank you." Catherine hesitated, then added, "I should warn you some on the board have concerns about the arrangement. They questioned its propriety." Russell's smile faded. "I wouldn't want to damage your standing in the community before you've even begun teaching." "My standing will depend on my abilities as a teacher, not on gossip," Catherine said firmly. "But I wanted you to be aware. I appreciate that." Russell studied her face. "You're not concerned about what people might say?" Catherine lifted her chin. "People have been saying I'll die alone since I was 20, Mr. Forrester. I've developed a thick skin when it comes to town gossip." A look of understanding passed between them, two people who had learned to live with others' expectations and judgments. "In that case," Russell said, "Hattie will be delighted to prepare your room. She's been complaining about the lack of female conversation for years." That evening, Russell and his men joined the Phillips family for supper again. The conversation was lively, centered around town news and the upcoming harvest festival. Catherine noticed how Russell listened more than he spoke, but when he did contribute, everyone paid attention. As the evening wound down, Catherine found herself alone with Russell on the porch once more. "I've been meaning to ask," she said. "How did you come to own land in the Arizona Territory? It's a long way from Missouri." Russell leaned against the porch railing, his profile strong in the lamplight. "After Sarah and Thomas died, I couldn't bear to stay. Too many memories. I sold our farm and drifted west, working cattle drives, saved every penny. When I reached this territory 3 years ago, I knew I'd found the place I wanted to build something lasting." "And have you?" "Found something lasting." His eyes met hers, serious and contemplative. "The ranch is thriving, but a legacy needs more than just land and cattle." The implication hung in the air between them, the unspoken acknowledgement that a true legacy required family, required love. Things they had both, for different reasons, believed were no longer possible. "Well," Catherine said softly, "tomorrow begins a new chapter for both of us. Russell nodded, a gentle smile touching his lips. Tomorrow, then. The journey back to Forrester Creek Ranch had a different quality than their previous travels. With Catherine officially under Russell's protection as his guest, there was a new awareness between them, a sense of possibility neither was ready to name. They arrived at the ranch by mid-afternoon. Hattie came bustling out to greet them, clearly delighted to have Catherine return. "I've prepared the east bedroom for you, dear," she announced. "It gets the morning sun and I've put up fresh curtains. Been saving the fabric for something special." Catherine was touched by the woman's thoughtfulness. "Thank you, Hattie. I hope I'm not causing too much extra work." "Nonsense. Having another woman around this place is a blessing." Hattie lowered her voice. "These men would live like savages if I let them. Now, I have an ally in the fight for civilization." The east bedroom was indeed charming, larger than Russell's room where she had stayed before, with a proper dressing table, a comfortable bed, and bookshelves that had been recently dusted. The curtains Hattie mentioned were a pretty blue calico that matched the quilt on the bed. "This is lovely," Catherine said, genuinely pleased. "It was the missus's sewing room back when the house was first built," Pete explained from the doorway. "Russell thought you might appreciate the extra space for your books and teaching materials." Catherine's heart warmed at the consideration. That was thoughtful of him. Over the next few days, Catherine established a routine. She would rise early, help Hattie with breakfast, then work on her lesson plans and organize her teaching materials at the small desk Russell had moved into her room. In the afternoons, she often walked the property or helped Hattie with household tasks. Russell respected her space, never entering her room, always knocking before approaching her when she sat on the porch reading. But she was acutely aware of his presence, the sound of his voice giving instructions to the ranch hands, the sight of him working with the horses in the corral, his quiet presence at the dinner table each evening. 5 days after their return to the ranch, Catherine was walking along the creek when she came upon Russell sitting on a fallen log, whittling a piece of wood. He looked up as she approached, setting aside his knife. "Mind some company?" she asked. "Not at all." He made room for her on the log. "What are you making?" Catherine nodded toward the wood in his hands. Russell held it up, the beginnings of a small horse taking shape. "Just passing time. My father taught me when I was a boy." "It's good," Catherine observed. "You have an artistic touch." "Wouldn't go that far," Russell said with a self-deprecating smile. "But it calms the mind." They sat in companionable silence for a moment, listening to the water flow over stones, the distant lowing of cattle, the rustle of leaves in the light breeze. "I've been meaning to ask," Catherine said finally. "How often do the children from outlying ranches come to town for school? Will I see them every day or just occasionally?" "Most stay with relatives or board in town during the school term," Russell explained. "The Coleman children stay with their aunt, the baker's wife. The Sutter boys board with Reverend Abernathy." "And your ranch, are there children here who will attend?" A shadow crossed Russell's face. "Not currently. Pete and Hattie's children are grown and gone to California. The other hands are unmarried." Catherine heard the unspoken longing in his voice, the wish for children to fill the home he had built. She changed the subject. "Hattie mentioned you sometimes play the fiddle in the evenings. I haven't heard you yet." Russell looked embarrassed. "It's just a hobby. Nothing fancy." "I'd like to hear it sometime," Catherine said. "Music was always part of our home when I was growing up. My mother played the piano and father sang. I miss it." "Do you play a little piano, enough to accompany simple songs?" Russell seemed to consider something. "There's an old piano in town at the church. Needs tuning, but it works. Perhaps next time we go in you could play." The idea that he envisioned future trips together, future shared moments, made Catherine's heart beat faster. I'd like that. As they walked back to the house together, Russell's hand occasionally brushed against hers, the touch seemingly accidental, yet each contact sent a current of awareness through Catherine's body. That evening, after supper, Russell disappeared briefly and returned with a well-worn fiddle. Without ceremony, he sat in his chair by the fireplace and began to play a sweet, melancholy tune that filled the small house with emotion. Catherine watched his face as he played, struck by the transformation. The usually guarded cowboy was lost in the music, his expression open and vulnerable. When he finished, she found herself blinking back unexpected tears. "That was beautiful," she said softly. "What's it called?" "Shenandoah," Russell replied. "Learned it from a river man years ago." "Would you play another?" He nodded, lifting the fiddle once more. This time, the tune was livelier, a dancing melody that had Hattie tapping her foot and Pete grinning from ear to ear. The evening passed with music and conversation, creating a sense of home that Catherine hadn't felt since before her father's death. When she finally retired to her room, she found herself reluctant for the day to end. As she prepared for bed, Catherine caught herself humming one of the tunes Russell had played. She stopped, realizing with sudden clarity that she was in danger of developing feelings for this quiet, complex man, feelings that could complicate her hard-won independence and her new position in the community. The sensible thing would be to maintain a proper distance, to focus on preparing for the school term, to remember her purpose in coming west. But as she drifted off to sleep, it was Russell's face she saw, the rare smile that transformed his solemn features, the depth of feeling in his eyes when he played his music, the gentle way he handled everything from frightened horses to delicate china cups. For the first time in years, Catherine Dawson wondered if the entire town of Millfield might have been wrong about her destiny. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of preparation. Catherine made the journey into town twice more with Russell to collect school supplies, meet more of her future students' parents, and finalize her curriculum with the board. Each time, their journey provided hours of conversation, gradually revealing more of each other's histories, hopes, and beliefs. On the Sunday before school was to begin, the entire ranch attended church services in town. Catherine sat between Hattie and Russell in the simple wooden church, acutely aware of the curious glances and whispers from the townspeople. After the service, as parishioners gathered outside to socialize, Martha pulled Catherine aside. "The whole town is talking about you and Russell," she whispered, eyes bright with excitement. "There's nothing to talk about," Catherine insisted. "He's been a kind host, nothing more." Martha gave her a knowing look. "Catherine Dawson, I've known you since we were girls. I've never seen you look at a man the way you look at Russell Forrester." "Martha, please, and more importantly," her cousin continued undeterred, "I've never seen a man look at you the way he does, like you're water in the desert." Catherine's cheeks flushed. "You're imagining things." "Am I?" "Then why is he watching us right now with such intensity?" Catherine glanced across the churchyard to where Russell stood with Dr. Phillips and several other men. Sure enough, his eyes were fixed on her, his expression unreadable from this distance. "He feels responsible for me," Catherine said, trying to sound practical. "I'm his guest." Martha sighed dramatically. "Stubborn as always. Well, when you're ready to admit what's happening between you two, I'll be here to say I told you so." The ride back to the ranch that afternoon was quieter than usual. Catherine was preoccupied with Martha's observations and her own conflicted feelings. Russell seemed lost in his own thoughts as well. As they approached the ranch, Russell finally broke the silence. "Are you nervous about tomorrow?" "A little," Catherine admitted. First days are always challenging. The children will be testing me, and I'll be learning their names and abilities. You'll do fine, Russell said with conviction. You know your subject and you care about teaching. That's more than most of these children have ever had. His faith in her abilities touched Catherine deeply. Thank you for everything, the accommodation, the escort to town, your support. Russell reined his horse to a stop, turning to look at her directly. Catherine, there's something I should tell you, her heart quickened. Yes. He hesitated, then seemed to change his mind. I won't be able to take you to town tomorrow. There's a situation with the north pasture fence that needs my attention. But Pete will drive you in the wagon, and I've arranged for him to pick you up after school ends. Oh, Catherine tried to hide her disappointment. Of course, you have a ranch to run. I don't expect you to rearrange your work for me. Russell studied her face as if trying to read her thoughts. I would if I could. The simple statement hung between them, laden with unspoken meaning. For a moment, Catherine thought he might say more, but he merely nodded and urged his horse forward again. That evening, after a quiet supper, Catherine went to her room early to review her plans for the first day of school. A soft knock on her door surprised her. Yes. Russell stood in the doorway, something in his hands. I hope I'm not disturbing you. Not at all. Please come in. He hesitated before stepping just inside the room, remaining near the door. I made something for you, for your classroom. He held out a small wooden object. Catherine took it, her fingers brushing his in the process. It was a beautifully carved apple, polished to a warm glow with a single leaf attached. It's traditional for students to give their teacher an apple, Russell explained, looking suddenly self-conscious. I thought you should have one, regardless. Emotion welled in Catherine's chest. It was such a thoughtful gesture, so unexpected from this reserved man. It's beautiful, Russell, thank you. You'll be a fine teacher, Catherine, he said softly. Those children are fortunate to have you. Their eyes met, and Catherine felt the air between them change, charged with an awareness that had been building since the day they met. Russell took a half-step toward her, then seemed to catch himself. I should let you prepare for tomorrow, he said, his voice rough. Good night, Catherine. Good night, Russell. After he left, Catherine sat on her bed, cradling the wooden apple in her hands. Such a small gift, yet it represented something profound. Russell's support of her vocation, his recognition of her as more than just a woman in need of protection or a potential wife. He saw her calling as valuable in its own right. For Catherine, who had spent her life defending her desire for education and independence, this understanding was more precious than any grand romantic gesture could have been. She placed the apple carefully on her desk, where it would remind her of this moment, this feeling, this man who continued to defy all her expectations. The first week of school passed in a whirlwind of activity. Catherine found her students to be a diverse group, some well-educated for their age, others barely literate, all curious about their new teacher from the East who lived at Forrester Ranch. Is it true you ride a horse better than most men, Miss Dawson? Asked 10-year-old Billy Jenkins on the third day. I ride adequately, Billy, but the comparison is irrelevant. Each person has different strengths, Catherine replied diplomatically. Pa says Mr. Forrester is sweet on you, piped up Mary Coleman, a precocious 8-year-old. Is that why you live at his ranch? Catherine felt heat rise in her cheeks. I live at Mr. Forrester's ranch because the teacher's quarters aren't finished yet. Now, let's return to our arithmetic lesson. Despite such moments, Catherine found herself thriving in the classroom. The children responded to her enthusiasm and her respect for their individual abilities. By Friday, she had established a routine and gained the students' trust, no small achievement in a community where outsiders were viewed with suspicion. Throughout the week, Pete faithfully delivered her to school each morning and collected her each afternoon. But Russell himself remained scarce, leaving before dawn for the north pasture and returning after she had retired for the night. Catherine tried not to feel hurt by his apparent avoidance. After all, she had come west to teach, not to pursue romance. Still, his absence left a hollow feeling that she couldn't quite ignore. On Friday afternoon, Catherine was surprised to see Russell himself waiting with the wagon when school dismissed. Her heart leapt at the sight of him, then faltered when she noticed his grim expression. "Is everything all right?" she asked as he helped her into the wagon. "Fine," he said shortly. "Just thought I'd come to town myself today. How was your first week?" "Challenging but rewarding," Catherine replied, studying his face. There were new lines around his eyes, a tension in his jaw that hadn't been there before. "Russell, has something happened?" he sighed, the rigid set of his shoulders relaxing slightly. "Just ranch troubles." "Nothing for you to worry about." "I live on your ranch," Catherine pointed out. "If there's something I should know—" "The Hanson gang hit the Gregory place 2 nights ago," Russell interrupted. "Killed Gregory and his oldest boy, took their cattle and horses." Catherine gasped. "How terrible." "The Gregorys have 3 younger children, don't they?" Russell nodded grimly. "Mrs. Gregory brought them into town yesterday. They're staying with her sister." "Were any of them hurt?" "No, thank God. The boys were in the barn when it happened. Mrs. Gregory kept them hidden." Russell's hands tightened on the reins. "The Gregory Ranch is less than 20 miles from my north pasture," understanding dawned. "That's why you've been gone all week. You've been securing the ranch." "As best I can," Russell confirmed. "Pete and I have moved the cattle closer to the house, and I've hired 2 more hands. But I'm concerned about your safety, Catherine. Surely they wouldn't attack a ranch as well established as yours. Outlaws aren't known for their good judgment." Russell's expression was troubled. "I'm wondering if you wouldn't be safer staying in town after all. Mrs. Jenkins mentioned she has a spare room now that her sister has returned to Texas." Catherine felt a stab of disappointment. "Are you asking me to leave?" "No," Russell said quickly. "God knows he stopped himself. "I'm just concerned for your safety." "I'm not afraid," Catherine said, meaning it. "And I would rather face potential danger at the ranch than definite discomfort in Mrs. Jenkins's spare room. The woman hasn't said 2 civil words to me since I arrived." A reluctant smile touched Russell's lips. "She can be prickly." "Like a cactus in August," Catherine agreed, relieved to see his tension ease slightly. "Besides, I've grown accustomed to Hattie's cooking and the quiet of the ranch in the evenings. And you," she wanted to add. "I've grown accustomed to knowing you're nearby, even when you're avoiding me." "If you're sure," Russell said, studying her face. "I am." The ride back to the ranch was filled with Catherine's stories of her first week teaching the bright students, the challenges, the funny moments. She was rewarded by Russell's gradual relaxation, his genuine interest in her experiences, and the return of the ease they had shared before. As they approached the ranch, Russell surprised her by saying, "I've missed our conversations this week." Catherine's heart warmed at the simple admission. "As have I thought." He hesitated, then continued in a rush. "I thought it might be best to keep some distance. People in town are talking, and I didn't want to compromise your position." "Russell Forrester," Catherine said firmly. "If I concerned myself with every whisper and rumor, I'd never leave my room. Let them talk. We know the truth of the situation." And what was the truth? Catherine wondered silently. That she was developing feelings for this man that went far beyond gratitude or friendship. That she found herself watching for him, thinking of him, dreaming of him. "Then I won't stay away anymore," Russell said quietly, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "If you're certain that's what you want." "It is," Catherine replied, her voice steadier than she felt. That evening, they resumed their pattern of gathering in the main room after supper, Russell with his whittling or a book, Catherine preparing lessons for the next week, Pete and Hattie playing checkers or mending by the fire. The simple domesticity of it felt both novel and deeply right to Catherine, as if she had found a place she belonged after years of drifting. Just as they were preparing to retire for the night, the sound of approaching horses broke the peaceful quiet. Russell immediately reached for his rifle, which stood ready by the door. "Stay inside," he ordered, his voice calm but commanding. "Pete, get the shotgun." Catherine's heart pounded as Russell stepped onto the porch, rifle at the ready. Through the window, she could see 3 riders approaching the house at a walk, not the headlong rush of raiders, but not a friendly visit either, given the late hour. "Forrester," a voice called. "Got business with you." "State it from there, Marshal," Russell replied, his posture relaxing slightly at the recognition of the lead rider. Catherine let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. The town marshal was not a threat, at least. Russell conferred with the riders for several minutes before inviting them inside. Marshal Davis, a weathered man with a gray mustache, nodded politely to Catherine as he entered. "Madam, didn't mean to frighten you. Just need to borrow Forrester here for a posse." "A posse?" Catherine repeated, alarm returning. "The Hanson gang was spotted near Copper Creek this afternoon," Russell explained, his expression grim. "Marshall's gathering men to go after them before they hit another ranch." "How many men do you have, Marshal?" Pete asked. "7, counting you 2 if you'll join us," the marshal replied. "Hansons are 4, maybe 5. We've got the numbers if we can catch them by surprise." Russell nodded decisively. "I'm in. Pete, you'll stay here, keep watch over the place." "I should go with you," Pete protested. "I'm a better shot, exactly why I need you here," Russell cut him off. "To protect the ranch. And Catherine." The reality of the danger hit Catherine fully then. These men were riding out to confront killers, men who had murdered a father and son just days before, and Russell would be among them. "When do we leave?" Russell asked, already moving to gather his gear. "First light," the marshal said. "Meeting at the North Fork of Copper Creek. Bring provisions for a few days. No telling how far we'll have to track them." As the men discussed the details, Catherine slipped away to the kitchen, needing a moment to compose herself. She filled a coffee pot with water, her hands trembling slightly. "He'll be all right," Hattie said softly from the doorway. "Russell's no stranger to danger." "I know," Catherine said, trying to sound confident. It's just that when you care for someone, watching them ride into harm's way is the hardest thing in the world," Hattie finished for her. "Been watching Pete ride out like this for 30 years. Doesn't get easier." Catherine didn't deny the implication that she cared for Russell, couldn't deny it, not anymore. "How do you bear it?" "Faith," Hattie said simply. "Faith and keeping busy so your mind doesn't conjure up every terrible possibility." When Catherine returned to the main room with coffee for the visitors, Russell was checking his ammunition while the marshal pointed out locations on a crude map spread on the table. "We'll head them off here," the marshal was saying, "before they reach the mountain pass. If they make it through there, we'll lose them for sure." Russell looked up as Catherine approached, his eyes softening at the sight of her. "Coffee for our guests." "Thank you, Catherine." As she set down the tray, their fingers brushed a momentary contact that nonetheless conveyed volumes. His silent apology for the disruption, her unspoken concern. After the marshal and his deputy had departed to gather the rest of the posse, Russell found Catherine on the porch, staring out at the star-filled sky. "I'm sorry about this," he said quietly, coming to stand beside her. "Bad timing with school just started." You don't need to apologize for doing what's right, Catherine replied. Those men need to be brought to justice before they harm anyone else. Russell nodded, his profile strong in the moonlight. Pete will look after things here, and you. I'm not worried about myself, Catherine said truthfully. It's you I'm concerned for. Russell turned to face her fully, surprise evident in his expression. Me? Yes, you, Catherine said, suddenly unable to maintain the pretense of mere friendship. The thought of you facing those murderers terrifies me. Catherine. He stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the warmth of his body in the cool night air. I've been in tight spots before. I'll be careful. You'd better be, she whispered, her voice catching. Because I've grown rather fond of our conversations, Russell Forrester, and I'd like to have many more of them. Something shifted in his eyes, a spark igniting into flame. Catherine, when I return, there's much I'd like to say to you, things I've been too cautious to speak aloud. Her heart hammered in her chest. I'll be here, waiting to hear them. For a moment she thought he might kiss her. His gaze dropped to her lips and he swayed slightly toward her. But then he straightened, a man remembering his duty. I should prepare for tomorrow, he said regretfully. Need to be ready to ride at first light. Of course. As Russell turned to go, Catherine impulsively caught his hand. Russell, be safe. He squeezed her fingers gently. I have more reason to return safely than I've had in a very long time, Catherine Dawson. The words followed her into her dreams that night, a promise, a possibility, a future neither had dared to imagine until now. Dawn came too quickly. Catherine rose and dressed before the first light, wanting to see Russell off. She found him in the kitchen, checking his provisions while Hattie prepared a hearty breakfast. You're up early, he observed, his voice gentle. I couldn't let you leave without saying goodbye, Catherine replied. They ate breakfast together, a quiet, intimate meal despite Pete and Hattie's presence. Too soon, it was time for Russell to depart. He checked his guns one last time, gave final instructions to Pete, and then turned to Catherine. I'll be back as soon as I can, he promised. I'll hold you to that, she replied, trying to sound braver than she felt. With Pete and Hattie tactfully moving to the porch, Russell took both her hands in his. Catherine, he stopped, seeming to struggle for words. Tell me when you return, Catherine said softly. Tell me everything then. He nodded, his eyes never leaving hers. Then, in a swift movement that caught her by surprise, he leaned down and pressed his lips to hers, a brief, tender kiss that conveyed more than words could have. Before she could respond, he was gone, striding toward the barn where his horse waited. Catherine touched her fingers to her lips, the warmth of his kiss lingering like a promise. The next 3 days were the longest of Catherine's life. She taught her classes with as much enthusiasm as she could muster, but her mind constantly wandered to Russell and the dangerous mission he had undertaken. On the 3rd evening, as she sat on the porch grading student essays, the sound of approaching horses made her heart leap into her throat. She stood, straining to see in the fading light. It's them, Pete called from the corral where he'd been keeping watch. They're back. Catherine clutched the porch railing, scanning the riders for Russell's familiar figure. There he was, in the middle of the group, dusty and tired-looking but blessedly whole. Relief flooded through her so powerfully that her knees nearly buckled. The men dismounted in the yard, their expressions grim despite their apparent victory. As Russell approached the porch, Catherine could see a bandage on his left arm, partially hidden by his rolled-up sleeve. You're hurt, she said, moving quickly down the steps to meet him. It's nothing, Russell assured her. Just a graze. Marshal Davis approached, removing his hat as he addressed Catherine. Madam, just wanted to let you know your man here is a genuine hero. Saved my life when one of the Hanson boys had the drop on me. He's not Catherine began automatically, then stopped, realizing the futility of the denial. "Is everyone all right? Did you catch them?" "Got 3 of them," the marshal said grimly. "2 will stand trial. 1 didn't give us that option." "And the 4th?" Catherine asked, noting they had mentioned 4 members of the gang. "Got away," Russell said, his voice tight with frustration. "But he's wounded. Won't get far." After the posse had departed, promising to return the next day to continue the search, Russell finally allowed Catherine to examine his wound properly. It was indeed just a graze, already cleaned and bandaged by one of the men with medical experience, but the sight of his blood-stained shirt made the danger he had faced terribly real. "You could have been killed," she said quietly, as she helped him change the bandage in the kitchen. "But I wasn't," Russell replied, his eyes never leaving her face. Catherine being out there facing that kind of danger, it clarifies things, makes a man see what truly matters. Her hand stilled on the bandage. "And what did you see, Russell?" "That I've been a fool," he said simply. "Keeping my distance, worrying about propriety and gossip when all along." He took a deep breath. "When all along I've been falling in love with you." The words hung in the air between them, momentous and irrevocable. Catherine's heart seemed to stop, then race ahead at twice its normal pace. "Russell," she whispered. You don't need to say anything," he interrupted. "I know you came west to be independent, to build a life on your terms. I respect that, admire it even. I'm not asking for promises. I just couldn't go another day without telling you how I feel." Catherine placed her palm against his cheek, feeling the roughness of his beard, the warmth of his skin. "You impossible man," she said with tender exasperation. "Do you think I've been worried sick these 3 days over a mere landlord? Do you think I would have let just any man kiss me before riding off to face outlaws?" Hope dawned in Russell's eyes. "Catherine, are you saying—" "I'm saying that I love you too," she admitted, the words simultaneously terrifying and liberating. "Though heaven knows it wasn't in my plans to fall in love with a stubborn, noble, infuriatingly careful cowboy." The smile that transformed Russell's face was worth every moment of worry, every whisper they would face, every challenge ahead. He pulled her close with his good arm, his forehead resting against hers. "They said you'd be alone forever," he murmured, echoing the predictions that had followed her from Millfield. Catherine smiled against his lips. "And you said—" "Forever starts with me," Russell answered, before claiming her mouth in a kiss that felt like coming home at last. The news of Catherine Dawson and Russell Forrester's courtship spread through Juniper Springs faster than a desert wildfire. Some approved, citing Russell's standing in the community and Catherine's respectable position as teacher. Others clucked their tongues at the impropriety of their living arrangement, conveniently forgetting the presence of the Millers as chaperones. Catherine faced the gossip with the same determination she brought to her teaching, neither hiding her relationship with Russell nor flaunting it inappropriately. When Reverend Abernathy hinted that her position might be reconsidered due to concerns about moral example, Catherine calmly invited him to observe her classroom for a day. "My personal life has no bearing on my ability to teach these children," she said firmly. "But if you believe it does, I encourage you to see my methods firsthand before making judgments." The Reverend, confronted with the actual reality of Catherine's excellent teaching and the children's obvious progress, reluctantly withdrew his objections. Russell, for his part, began making regular appearances at school functions, donating lumber for bookshelves, and offering the use of his wagon to transport children from outlying areas during bad weather. His quiet support gradually won over even the most skeptical parents. As autumn deepened toward winter, their evenings at the ranch took on a new sweetness. No longer constrained by uncertainty or propriety, They could openly enjoy each other's company, reading aloud from favorite books, discussing the day's events, planning for the future. One Sunday in late November, Russell suggested a picnic by the creek, despite the cooler temperatures. Catherine happily agreed, having come to love the peaceful spot where they had shared so many conversations. As they sat on a blanket spread over the fallen leaves, the afternoon sun casting a golden glow over the landscape, Russell suddenly grew serious. "Catherine, there's something I've been wanting to ask you," he began, reaching for her hand. "These past months have been the happiest I've known since, well, maybe ever. You've brought life and laughter back to this ranch, back to me." Catherine's heart quickened. "You've given me something precious too, Russell, a place where I'm valued for exactly who I am, not despite it." "Then perhaps," Russell said, his voice slightly unsteady, "you might consider making this place your permanent home, and me your permanent companion." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small ring, a delicate gold band set with a single pearl surrounded by tiny diamonds. "It was my grandmother's," he explained. "My father gave it to me before I left Missouri, hoping I'd find happiness again someday." Catherine's vision blurred with tears as Russell continued, "I'm not asking you to give up teaching or your independence. I would never want to change the woman I fell in love with. I'm asking if you'll build a life with me as partners, as equals." "Yes," Catherine whispered, then louder, "Yes, Russell Forrester, I will marry you." He slipped the ring onto her finger, then gathered her into his arms for a kiss that promised a lifetime of understanding, respect, and passion. They were married on Christmas Eve in the Juniper Springs Church, decorated with pine boughs and candles for the holiday. Martha served as matron of honor. Dr. Phillips stood up with Russell, and the entire town turned out for the celebration, even those who had initially disapproved of their relationship. "Never seen a more perfect match," Mayor Wilkins declared at the reception, apparently having forgotten his earlier reservations. "Like they were made for each other." Pete leaned over to whisper in Hattie's ear, "Convenient memories these townspeople have." "Hush," Hattie scolded, though her eyes twinkled with amusement. "Let them have their perfect day." And perfect it was, from Catherine's simple ivory gown, hastily ordered from a catalog but arriving just in time, to Russell's uncharacteristically emotional vows that left not a dry eye in the congregation. "I thought my heart was buried with my past," he had said, his voice rough with emotion. "You taught me it was just waiting, like a seed in winter soil, for the right person to help it grow again." As they drove back to the ranch that night, now truly their home, the stars seemed to shine with particular brilliance above them, and the future stretched before them full of promise. "Mrs. Forrester," Russell said, testing the name as he helped her down from the wagon, "has a nice sound to it." "Indeed it does, Mr. Forrester," Catherine agreed with a smile, "though I'll still be Miss Dawson to my students." "Of course," Russell said seriously, "your work is important. I wouldn't have it any other way." He swept her into his arms to carry her over the threshold, a tradition Catherine had called silly but secretly found romantic. As he set her down in the main room, now decorated with evergreen boughs and red ribbons for the holiday, Catherine was struck by how completely this place had become home in just a few months. "Happy?" Russell asked, watching her face. "More than I ever imagined possible," Catherine answered truthfully. "And you?" In response, Russell pulled her into his arms, his kiss conveying everything words could not: the joy of finding love when both had resigned themselves to solitude, the promise of a shared future, the certainty that they had found in each other exactly what they needed. Later that night, as Catherine lay in Russell's arms in what was now truly their bedroom, She thought of all the people back in Millfield who had predicted she would die alone, the suitors she had rejected, the gossips who had labeled her unmarriageable, even her own father who, though loving, had worried about her independence. How surprised they would be to see her now married to a man who valued her mind as much as her heart, who supported her vocation rather than asking her to abandon it, who looked at her with a mixture of respect and desire that made her feel both powerful and cherished. "What are you thinking?" Russell murmured, his fingers tracing patterns on her bare shoulder. "That sometimes the best life is the one you never planned," Catherine replied, nestling closer to his warmth. "And that forever is a promise worth keeping." Russell's arms tightened around her. "Forever," he agreed, the word both a vow and a blessing as they drifted toward sleep beneath the star-filled desert sky. Spring brought new beginnings to Forrester Creek Ranch. The teachers' quarters in town were finally completed, but Catherine had no need for them now. Instead, she and Russell converted the ranch's unused bunkhouse into a small schoolroom where she taught the children from neighboring ranches 3 days a week, supplementing their education during seasons when travel to town was difficult. "You've created something special here," Russell observed one afternoon as he watched Catherine work with 10-year-old Emma Sullivan on her reading. "These children would have had no schooling at all between harvest and planting." "Every child deserves education," Catherine said simply. "And it gives me more time here, with you and the ranch." Their partnership extended beyond their marriage and Catherine's teaching. Russell valued her opinions on ranch matters, from breeding decisions for the cattle to financial investments. In turn, Catherine learned the practical aspects of ranch life, discovering a previously unknown talent for animal husbandry and a deep satisfaction in the rhythms of the seasons. Summer brought the news they had both hoped for. Catherine was expecting a child, due in the early winter. The prospect of parenthood filled them both with joy, tinged with the natural anxiety of those who had seen how fragile life could be. "I'm scared," Russell admitted one night as they lay together, his hand resting protectively over Catherine's still flat stomach. "After Thomas." "I know," Catherine said softly, covering his hand with her own. "But we can't let fear rob us of joy, Russell. This child will have 2 parents who love it fiercely, the best medical care we can provide, and a whole community looking out for it." As Catherine's pregnancy progressed, the ranch prepared for its newest member. Russell converted a small room adjacent to their bedroom into a nursery, crafting a cradle with his own hands, carving delicate woodland animals along its sides. Hattie knitted blankets and tiny clothes, while Pete constructed a rocking chair for those inevitable nights of soothing a crying infant. In town, Martha organized a gathering where the women of Juniper Springs presented Catherine with quilts, baby clothes, and practical advice. Even Mrs. Jenkins, who had initially been among Catherine's most vocal critics, contributed a beautiful christening gown that had been in her family for generations. "Never thought I'd see the day," Pete commented as he and Russell mended fences one crisp October morning. "Whole town treating Catherine like she's always belonged here." Russell smiled, hammering a nail with practiced efficiency. "She has a way about her, makes people better just by expecting them to be." "Made you better, that's for certain," Pete said bluntly. "Never seen a man more transformed by love." Russell didn't deny it. The lonely, grief-stricken man who had built this ranch as a place to escape his memories had become a husband who looked forward to each day, a rancher who took pride in creating a legacy, a future father who dared to hope again. In early December, as the first snow dusted the mountains in the distance, Catherine went into labor. Russell sent Pete racing for Dr. Phillips while Hattie prepared the bedroom with practiced efficiency. "Everything will be fine," Hattie assured Russell as he paced the main room, driven out of the bedroom by Catherine's firm insistence that his anxious hovering wasn't helping. She's strong, and the baby's positioned right. The doctor arrived just in time to assist with the final stages. After what seemed an eternity to Russell, a healthy cry pierced the night, followed by Dr. Phillips's cheerful announcement. "You have a daughter, Russell. A beautiful little girl." Russell entered the bedroom on shaky legs to find Catherine propped against pillows, tired but radiant, a small bundle cradled in her arms. She looked up at him, tears of joy streaming down her face. "Come meet your daughter," she whispered. Russell approached the bed almost reverently, overwhelmed by the sight of the tiny, perfect face peering out from the blankets. A tuft of dark hair, a miniature nose, impossibly small fingers that curled reflexively around his when he touched them. "She's miraculous," he breathed, sitting carefully on the edge of the bed. "Just like her mother." Catherine shifted the bundle toward him. "Would you like to hold her?" With hands that had broken wild horses and faced down outlaws but now trembled with emotion, Russell gathered his daughter into his arms. She weighed almost nothing, yet he felt the profound weight of responsibility, of love, of possibility. "What shall we name her?" Catherine asked softly, watching the wonder on her husband's face. Russell looked from his daughter to his wife, these two beings who had transformed his life in ways he could never have imagined. "What about Hope? It seems fitting." "Hope Forrester," Catherine tested the name, smiling. "Perfect." "And for her middle name, what do you think of Sarah? To honor her father's past while we build her future." Russell's eyes filled with tears at the generous gesture. "Hope Sarah Forrester," he agreed, his voice rough with emotion. "Welcome to the world, little one. You are so very loved." As the winter settled over Forrester Creek Ranch, the small family established new rhythms around the baby's needs. Catherine reduced her teaching temporarily, but continued to work with a few advanced students who came to the ranch for lessons. Russell rearranged the ranch schedule to be present for more of Hope's waking hours, often carrying her in a sling as he supervised work near the house. Their first Christmas as parents was a quiet celebration, made special by Hope's presence, and the handmade gifts they exchanged: a new rocking chair from Russell for Catherine, carved with intricate patterns of books and flowers, a leather-bound journal from Catherine for Russell, the first pages already filled with her accounts of Hope's earliest days. As they sat before the fire that night, Hope sleeping peacefully in her cradle nearby, Catherine rested her head on Russell's shoulder. "Happy?" he asked, the question he had asked on their wedding night now a familiar refrain between them. "Completely," Catherine replied. "And grateful. For you, for Hope, for this life we're building." Russell pressed a kiss to her forehead. "They said you'd be alone forever," he reminded her with a smile. "And you proved them wrong," Catherine finished, tilting her face up for a proper kiss. "Forever is just beginning, Russell Forrester, and I intend to savor every moment of it with you." Outside, snow began to fall, covering the ranch in a blanket of pristine white, while inside, the small family created against all odds, strengthened by shared values and mutual respect, bound by a love both passionate and enduring, celebrated the greatest gift of all, the promise of a future together. Years later, when Hope was joined by a brother named Thomas, and later a sister called Alina, when the ranch had expanded to include a proper school building where Catherine taught children from throughout the territory, when Russell's cattle operation had become one of the most respected in Arizona, visitors to Forrester Creek Ranch invariably commented on the same thing: not the prosperity or the innovation, but the palpable love that infused every aspect of the place. It was there in the way Russell still watched Catherine cross a room, his eyes lighting up at the sight of her. It was evident in how Catherine treasured the wooden carvings Russell created for each family milestone. It showed in their partnership as they faced challenges together, in their respect for each other's strengths, in their unwavering support of each other's dreams. "You're the luckiest people I know," Martha commented during one of her visits, watching Russell and Catherine work together to gentle a new foal, their movements in perfect harmony after years of marriage. Catherine smiled, watching as Russell demonstrated to their children how to approach the nervous animal. "Not luck," she corrected gently. "Choice. Every day we choose each other, choose this life, choose to remember what matters most." And in that choice made first on a dusty trail when a practical arrangement became the foundation for something profound, reinforced through challenges and joys, renewed with each sunrise lay the true meaning of forever. Not an endless expanse of time, but a daily commitment to love made real through actions, through presence, through the building of a life worthy of the word. For Catherine and Russell, forever had indeed started with a chance meeting, a broken wagon wheel, and a cowboy who refused to believe a remarkable woman was destined to be alone. But it continued through their deliberate creation of a life that honored both their pasts and their shared future, a legacy of love that would outlast them both in the children they raised, the community they strengthened, and the example they set of a partnership equal in respect, passion, and purpose. And in the end, that was the greatest adventure either could have imagined, far greater than the journey west that had brought them together, more fulfilling than any solitary achievement could have been. Together, they had rewritten both their stories into something neither had dared to dream possible. A love strong enough to heal past wounds, brave enough to face an uncertain future, and deep enough to truly deserve the promise of forever.